blade. It has the same fins in the back, like the dampening fins, which is what gives them that really, really smooth sound. And it has the like the same gasket that the 12th generation just added recently, which you'll actually notice when I turn it up that these still sounded smooth while these sounded a tiny bit raspy. And that's because as these get louder, you start getting a little bit of air leakage right outside of the tweeter island there, which is like the little horn. These have a gasket, just like in the new 12th generation Uni Qs, which this is kind of interesting seeing that it took this long for them to go back to what they already had in the original prototype. So the LS50 metas, that's another story. The LS50 metas basically rely on everyone forgetting that the LS50s are called LS50s because they were supposed to sound like the LS35As. So now all of a sudden the LS50 metas are the second generation of the LS50s because time passes, you don't want to keep making the same drivers over and over again. They're on their 12th generation Uni Q, so they obviously can't just keep making this driver just for the sake of this one speaker, but this speaker is probably the most profitable speaker they have. This thing is actually cheaper than making this thing. This is a wooden box. It has all the same features. The constrained layer dampening. That's the gasket right there. It's called the Crock Bell approach. I don't know. Basically, you heard it. It's basically the same quality sound, the same signature sound of the LS35As, but the LS50 metas are the next generation of this speaker, based off of the next generation driver, which is the 12th generation Uni Q. And the ads talk about it being based off of this technology called Meta Tech, which is a little disc that apparently absorbs all the back wave behind the tweeter and reduces the distortion, which is like 0.0000001 down to 0.000000005. So that's a whopping 200% improvement. So that's pretty much how marketing works. So the LS50 metas, yeah, they have meta technology, which might as well be called made up technology because it doesn't really do anything, and no one else cares about the back wave. That's why no other company does it. The only reason why KEF actually originally did do the rear vent was because they had a rivalry with BMW. BMW came out with the Nautilus. The Nautilus did actually have a rear tube for their mids and for their bass, and so it'd be kind of weird for them to not have it for their tweeter as well. So aesthetically, they also added one for the tweeter, but it wasn't really as necessary because, as everyone knows, high frequency sound is not really an issue as far as absorption. You could eliminate high frequency sound pretty easily. So the new LS50 metas actually just pretty much are typical KEF speakers. They are no longer at all even trying to sound like the LS35As, and that's kind of an odd selling point because they'll tell you that it's 33% smoother in its frequency response when the original LS50 could have had a roller flat frequency response if they wanted to. I mean, KEF could do that if they wanted to. They do everything on computers, and the LS50 was designed to sound like the LS35As specifically, and that actually took more work than to have a roller flat frequency response. So you could get the LS50 still. They're pretty good speakers. I still recommend them, especially if you want just a clean setup. They go down to respectable 60 hertz in room. You don't quite need a sub, not necessarily. Or you can do my trick and get this and that, and this and that, and pretty much something that sounds pretty close to the blade. Or then you could get the LS50 metas, which is pretty much this minus all the marketing. So basically, the 12th generation Uni Q flat response curve the same recycled design as far as like the baffle and the cabinet, just with the new 12th generation Uni Q slapped in, and it sounds just like you imagine a KEF would sound. It no longer has any distinct sound signature that gives it any sort of like a legacy or any sort of connection to the past that these do. So I actually prefer these just because they actually do have some value in the sense where they are supposed to be a reboot, like almost like using new technology to bring the LS35As back to life. The LS50 Metas are just kind of a knockoff of these speakers by KEF, oddly enough. And the excuse for why they would change the driver and the sound is the Meta technology, which is complete BS, to be honest. It's just, it's I'm sorry, KEF, but come on. It's just marketing. And it's just there to make it so that any change you hear, you would presume must be better, because they tell you that the frequency response is smoother and that the Meta tech is getting rid of distortion at levels that nobody would ever detect. Take that and cut it in half. Yeah. So that is your options as far as like what you could go for now. So these go for pretty cheap right now because the LS50 Metas are out, and I wouldn't really suggest you get the LS50 Metas. I'd actually would recommend something more like the R series with the, you know, like something like the extra woofer, because as far as the LS50 Metas, they just don't really have anything special about them anymore. I don't really see any purpose behind the existence of the LS50 Metas at all, except for just riding on the coattails of these and hoping that people forgot why these even exist to begin with. So I guess that's the end of my video. So that's the long, convoluted history of why these existed, why the patent matters in all industries. When patents expire, things change, marketing has to fill in the blanks, paint a whole entire mythology, creates a whole entire story, makes it sound very exciting, and then it's kind of the same thing happened with the, yeah, calling LS50 Metas is kind of like a funny pun, because it's kind of meta in the sense where the LS50 Metas themselves actually needed to create an excuse, because they're no longer making these drivers, to come out with a second edition. They couldn't call it the LS50 SEs because, and you know, if they were to do that, they'd have to actually tune the 12th generation drivers to sound like these, which would take work. So they just instead took the 12th generation drivers and kept them flat, and then just told you that the Meta tech is surely what's causing them to sound different, and different is good. The end. LS50 Metas are better because of the Meta tech. They're not the LS50 SEs, and they are definitely not just the LS50s with the 12th generation Uni Q, because we no longer make the drivers to the LS50 originals anymore. Definitely not that. Okay, so anyway, I know that was long, but it's a very complicated world when you're behind the scenes with giant corporations, marketing, R&D, mythology, company branding. But it's pretty interesting to get into, and if you get into it, there's actually lots of pretty cool life hacks you get out of it. Anyway, thanks for listening.